Thank you. This is Scott Rogers. I call to order the Appropriations Committee meeting of Tuesday, March 18th. This open meeting of the Northborough Appropriations Committee is being conducted in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the committee are allowed to participate either in person or remotely. The Act allows the committee to meet in person and remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream or the recording of the meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed in the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Bob D'Amico? Aye. George Brinkle?
Here.
Terry Halloran?
Here.
Tim Tim Kalin?
Combination.
And Jeff Knight, his brother.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Stephanie Bacon?
Here.
And Jason Little?
Here.
Great. First order of business, public comment. If there is any, either in the meeting or in the room, raise your hand if you have a comment. Seeing none, we'll move to the next item. We'll pass over the approval of the meeting minutes. Those minutes are not ready yet. And so we'll go right into the Department of Public Works and Enterprise Funds. Start with our Director of Public Works, Scott Charpentier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go over quickly the quote-unquote initiatives that are included in the budgets, which is where the majority of the new items are included. There are some other larger items that are not new, they're just continuances. Under the Water Sewer Enterprise Funds, we're proposing to add a seasonal employee. We have seasonal employees on the parks and highway side. They assist with some of the summer-only tasks. These are generally college kids who are home for the summer. They'll help with painting fire hydrants, picking up, clearing solid waste, mowing, weed whacking, that kind of thing. So we're proposing to bring one onto the Water Sewer Division. That would be 60% water, 40% sewer. Couple reasons to do it. One, we need the resource. The staff generally do not take any vacations in the wintertime due to storms. Summertime is vacation time. It'd be nice to have a staff member to help out with the mowing and some of the smaller tasks so our licensed technicians can focus on the needs of the utilities. Second, there's an extreme shortage of professionals entering the water and the sewer career paths. It's a good job, high school education, $1,000 worth of training for 6 months, and all of a sudden you're a licensed water operator, and there's jobs everywhere. It's just, there's not a lot of exposure to the high school kids about that. So our hope is we can promote the industry, help out the community, and maybe get the word out so we can get a new generation of water sewer operators in here, because a lot of the ones we have are turning gray. So that's one of the initiatives on the water sewer side, the only one. A couple of the other items, we have a dog park that'll be introduced to our operations. Dog parks take maintenance. Dogs, tend to dig things up. We'll have to maintain that facility. I'm not exactly sure what the level of effort's going to be, but we did put funds in the operating budget to accommodate additional mulch, trash services, raking, the parking lot, things like that. Brigham Street Burial Ground, excuse me, that came online last year. It was a wonderful construction project. It looks far better than it did before, and I believe it's appropriate for a burial ground in Northborough to look like that. The grass is a challenge down there. There's no irrigation. It's shaded, and the soils there need a lot of amending. If you remember, it was covered in pines, where there were hemlocks, and there was a lot of oaks. Hemlocks and oaks are very acidic. We need to fertilize the soil. We need to aerate it, seed it, make sure it takes well. So we're including those services in this year's operating budget on the cemeteries. And then, excuse me, so the dog park is parks, obviously. And then highway side, the capital project last year that was approved at town meeting for installation of a tight tank. That's occurring. We're actually having the pre-construction meeting tomorrow. That work is expected to begin in the next couple weeks and proceed through the beginning of the summer. Tight tank, and quickly, is a big underground tank where our floor drains from where we wash our trucks will drain into. Periodically over the year, we're going to have to pump that tank out and truck it away. Currently, the floor drains go to the septic system, which is not allowed. You should only have human waste going to a septic system. You cannot have floor drains from mechanics bays, which will be a different tight tank, and wash bays to a tight tank. We'll have two. One has the mechanics things in it, really nasty stuff. We don't want to mix that with 30,000 gallons of just wash water. But that's going to be expensive to pump. We're estimating it at $50,000 a year to pump out. We'll know more next year, but we did base that on water meter use records and estimated costs from local pumping companies who can pump them and truck it. So those are the only real new initiatives being proposed this year. Outside of that, I can certainly go through the operating budgets, line item by line item, if you like, to describe where we've increased things, or I'm not sure how you want to proceed.
Yeah, Scott, I was going to say, sorry about, just as we go through, if you can just orient us to which line items are hit by those 4 items, that would be good. Bob?
Thank you, through the chair. Just a question on the CPC helping with the dog park. Is that a possibility? Can they help fund some of the not problems, but maintenance that you have?
I've never had CPA funds utilized for ongoing maintenance. 20 years from now, the fence needs to be replaced, yes. But as far as maintenance operations go, no.
You don't know what that cost is going to be, and it could be.
I don't know. It's a large area of mulch and stone dust, and
Is that something that is allowed or is not allowed?
I don't know what the purview is of the Community Preservation Act, if it's allowed. We were able to use CPA funds for maintenance of White Cliffs, ongoing maintenance of White Cliffs until that fund is exhausted, so.
I think, sorry to interrupt you, Scott, but I think that article, the work that's being done and being classified as maintenance or mentioned as maintenance is preservation work. And that's what the scope of the article was for. I think that there's a prohibition against using the CPA funds for quote maintenance. But if there's a recreation project, it could be spent for project uses. But what one person defines as maintenance versus preservation could be debatable. But I think everything within the scope has been for the carrying cost of that building and with the purpose of preserving it.
No, I know we couldn't carry those costs forever, obviously, but I know there was still some work that needed to be done on the dog park too, and I was wondering if those kind of funds can be allocated from.
Yeah, from what I've discussed with the planning director, every single dollar will be spent on construction. So.
Thank you.
Yep. So, Mr. Chairman, you do have a memorandum, and so do the other committee members. That's a relatively brief 2-page memorandum dated March 12th from me. This describes in a little more detail some of the budget changes that are presented in the packet that Jason provided. Would you like me to go through this, Scott, or do you want me to go through the budget pack? What do you prefer?
So, for example, on the seasonal sewer water worker, it might not have gotten updated into the personnel table yet that we were using, but I'm wondering if we would see it in the staffing table, the budget table for staff. So if I go to
I don't think it is.
cemetery, facility, water sewer.
It is not.
Okay, so we would see some updates to that.
So in the, under the, looking for Parks Division. Yeah, so under the Parks Division, Highway, Parks, Cemeteries, we do not list seasonal employees. I'm referring to page 4.8 and 4.9. These are only full-time employees, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jason.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Yep.
I haven't updated these tables.
Then the seasonals undulate. We have slots for 4 seasonals in the Parks and Highway. If we can get 4, great. If we get 5, wonderful. If we get 3, it undulates. And then sometimes they're on different cycles. Wentworth is a trimester, so we got to get Wentworth students a little different window, which is great.
Then would we see that the dollars for those seasonal workers then?
You would see them in the enterprise fund write-up that is not included in your packet.
Okay, so then in terms of the
It isn't here.
memo, do you indicate the amount for the seasonal?
Yep.
I'm just not seeing it.
I did not include it in the memorandum. It is a total, it wasn't a substantial amount. That's why it wasn't included. Seasonal employee on the sewer side, so 40% of that person would be 44. So in all, and amongst both enterprise funds, it's $11,000.
Oh, okay.
One seasonal employee, 600 hours at $18.50 an hour. It's $11,100 total, $44.40 being out of the sewer division, then the remainder out of the water division. The memorandum covered more high-level numbers, for example.
Materials for the dog park, that's.
Yes, yeah, staying on the water enterprise fund, we're proposing a $96,000 increase. 54 of it is for the MWRA, and then 25 is to reinstate half of our hydrant program. We eliminated the fire hydrant replacement program, which was funded at $50,000. When COVID hit, enterprise funds is a self-sustaining account. COVID hit, it hit our revenue hard, and the MWRA assessment even harder. So it took us a few years to recover, to build up our fund balance to what we want to have, which is 75 days or 25% of our operating budget. Now that we're there and we're comfortable, we reinstated half of the hydrant replacement program, $25,000. It's basically 50-50. You buy materials for half, and then you hire guys to put them in the ground for half. It's about what it is. So we have hydrants this year. We're going to hire a contractor to replace them. So those are the only two real initiatives in the water division. And MWRA sets their assessment for us. We have no say on that.
How's that compared to prior year?
It's similar. It's similar. They're generally in the 3 to 4% range, very similar to our rate increases. They're generally 3 to 4%. The way it works, it's a look back. So they look back on the prior fiscal year, and they say, you've used 0.5% of our supply. And because you've used 0.5% last year, this year, you're going to pay 0.5% of our budget. And their budget includes operations, capital, all that stuff. What hit us hard in COVID was everybody stayed home, so Northborough used a lot of water, and Boston, which is like 80% of the use, didn't use any, because nobody was there. So that next year, we look like a very high percentage user. Our assessment went up over $300,000 that year. That's at a number that's usually about 1.5. So half of every dollar that we spend in the water division goes back to the MWRA. So having that humongous swing took us this long to recover. Other communities recovered right away because they didn't care about their fund balance, and they just kept on plugging away and crossed their fingers and hope nothing bad happened. We don't operate like that. We're a lot more conservative. The last thing I want to have is an emergency meeting because something broke and we can't fix it. So we're finally getting back, believe it or not. COVID still impacts us. On the sewer enterprise fund, it's a modest increase over 2025. It's a 3.7% increase, and you don't have these in your packet, unfortunately, but I will go over them as best I can for you. So in the sewer enterprise fund, we're proposing an increase of $100,870. Call it $101,000. We have a bunch of debt falling off, which is good. We want debt to fall off, so next time a capital project comes in, we can afford it without having this massive changes in rates and revenue. We're proposing a $200,000 increase to our Marlboro assessment. That's the single largest line item. There are no other initiatives in the sewer division outside of Marlboro, half a seasonal employee, and reinstating cartridge replacements. Our pump stations have grinder cartridges in them. Think about the teeth on your garbage disposal, but bigger and nastier. We replace one every year. They're $15,000. We cancel that out when COVID hit. We're putting that back in, one a year. That's only $15,000. But again, the budget's going up by 100, but we're increasing Marlboro by 2. So then delta is all of our debt falling off. Marlboro, this is our first full year of reconciliation with Marlboro. Everybody's familiar with the IMA that we went through. Well, this is our first full year of it. Last one was a negotiation. We established the rules of engagement, for lack of better terms, this huge table that says, here's all the stuff we're going to pay for and what percentages are Northboroughs and Marlboroughs. This will be the first year that we reconcile. Last year, we had $1.3 million in the budget for it. It came in just over 1.2. I don't know what increase that was over the prior year. I don't know if the prior year was 1.1, it went up 100, or the prior year was 90 and it went up 900, it went up 3. So this year, we're carrying $1.5 million. $200,000 increase over last year, but a $300,000+ cushion just to find out what it looks like. And once we get a little history to base these adjustments on, that number will become much more fine-tuned and won't grow so quickly. I'm hoping it remains the same. This year, last year was just under 1.2. Maybe this year comes in just over 1.3, and I don't need to do 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, so.
When is that, when do the actuals come in and we see the assessment?
Same fiscal year as us. They finished July. The deal is I'm supposed to get it by the end of August. And then we go back and forth in September to make sure everything is okay. Usually, the last time it went very well, because we derived the numbers together. And then we pay them 45 days after agreement.
So that makes sense that you're budgeting enough to
Yeah.
handle surprises.
Same thing. I don't want to be back here for an emergency.
Why don't we have data for prior years? Why is that?
Well, when we were in litigation,
Yeah.
they had no obligation to provide us their operational expenses while we were in litigation.
But now we're out of litigation.
Yeah.
Can't they provide us that information now?
Yeah, they don't run like we do. They don't have enterprise funds. They have just funds. So I want to go replace cartridges, and I need $80,000 for cartridges. I go to the city council and I say, I need $80,000, and they give it to you. Well, they don't. All their operating money is in one big pot. So it's very complicated for them to break it out into what's dedicated to, and beyond that, it's not just sewer. They got collection, stormwater's in their sewer, they got an easterly plant and a westerly plant. So they got to break all those different things up. One of the breakups would be, for example, finance director's salary. The enterprise fund's going to cover 5% of that. Well, when you go backwards, if the finance director's position was empty, maybe they had a consultant come in and cover for 3 months. Well, that consultant's on another line item. So it's like you're chasing your tail in this big pit. We finally have a good mechanism for it, so I'm hoping going forward, we can get some history, some actual data.
So basically, too, you can look at it as that the rules change. Once finally an agreement came to, you've got a new set of rules or principles of how you're going to determine this, and you don't have history of having determined it that way in the past, so.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so this year, they're doing what they have to keep those numbers in a column.
Yeah.
If they were to try to derive those numbers from prior years, they'd have to dig around and figure out how to fill in the columns, because the numbers are all over the place. So,
Well, that kind of concerns me because, now we don't know. They can put whatever numbers they want to.
yeah, and everything has backup. I get copies of the electric bills, copies of their payroll, like the spreadsheet itself is probably, it's 11 by 17, it's 3 pages. But the backup is 300 to 400 pages. Like sludge weight slips and the sludge disposal pricing. I get the liquid content of the sludge. When you have sludge, you squeeze all the water out because this trucking and burning water is expensive. So you want to make sure that the moisture content is as low as possible so they don't not squeeze enough and charge us more. So it's pretty detailed what we get.
Good luck.
Back in the old days leading up to 2015, prior to the lawsuit, we would get an entire bound book with details of the expenses. There is transparency in the numbers that they provide us. It is part of their general fund, but they do have, they use a accounting system that has a ledger system that accounts for the costs of the fund. But what Scott's talking about is that the more, the indirect costs that they're allocating to us that we've agreed to through the IMA, they're clear. They do lay those out for us.
Right.
But we went from 2015 to 2023 through the court case. So those I think those costs may have been estimated based on discovery through the case.
Yeah.
Correct, Scott?
Yeah, and I have good numbers from 21 when we were in close to negotiations. It was based on the same thing, and they did the same effort in 21. They drilled all through, we got right to where we wanted to be, which is basically where we are today with a couple changes, and then the mayor blew it up. Like literally just said, that's a great number, I want you to multiply it by 1.5, and that's what they pay. So that's when it ended, and we went back to court.
Not there anymore.
No, long gone.
All right, any questions on the general operational budget or the enterprise funds budget?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
on the solid waste fund, the town makes a contribution to that.
Correct.
Any thought of increasing fees of bags, et cetera, to cover that?
I looked into our bag fees, probably 2000 was COVID, so probably like 5 or 6 years ago. And we were amongst the high, we were in like the middle of the top third as far as what our bag fees were. And we were amongst the bottom third on what the subsidy is, the tax subsidy.
Well, I appreciate that was 4 or 5 years ago. We're also at a point where we're at a 2.5 cap. So finding ways to reduce town expenses and put it into user fees seems like a very reasonable and rational approach to solving some of our budget problems. So I would advise you guys to take a look at that again. And if it's high, it's high. But people need to, if you're paying for it, you're paying for it.
I'm happy to look at it again. Best case scenario, we come in and we review it and we say, wow, we're in the bottom middle third, let's raise them up. And we raise them, let's say it's in October. The tax subsidy is the last pot of money you go to. So if the revenue goes up, you spend out of your revenue account, and what's not spent out of the tax subsidy goes right back into free cash. So I can look at that. One of the challenges with evaluating that is, I don't know if anybody lived in any other towns, but there are so many different ways people do it. Auburn, you put a sticker on a trash barrel, and then everything after that, you've got to buy bags. Some places have dual recycling. One of the challenges we have is we have trash on the side of the road in a bag. So the cost to collect is much more expensive than the automated ones. So there's a lot of anomalies and modifications to the program we could make that could save money. It's just a matter of looking into it.
I'm just looking at a 2.5 override.
Yep.
And we got to figure out ways to minimize that. The whole reason we have bags to start with is because we were trying to avoid 2.5 way back when. So it's a $600,000 or $700,000 hit to the taxes that we could figure out ways to give ourselves, because we need, in my opinion, as you know, I think we need to create as much cushion as possible under the cap for next year, and we can't wait till next year necessarily, so this is one place to take a look at it. When was the last time we increased the price of a bag?
I don't believe we have.
Yeah, we can look into.
So what, and kind of from a proportion standpoint, what proportion of residents use the town and what proportion of the residents use private?
We estimate that every year, and it fluctuates. Harvey's is required, or Tidy Town is required to alert us of how many of our residents do. Generally speaking, it's 4,000 on us and maybe 800 on private haulers, something like that. I'd have to look up at the hard numbers, but that's generally what I remember. I know there are people who are transitioning from private hauling to us. I've had a lot of phone calls of recent doing that. I think they're just realizing it's fiscally responsible to, especially the more the subsidy is. If you're subsidizing in your taxes, you're already paying 50 or 75% of the cost. You might as well just utilize the service.
In terms of dollar amounts from the bag program, do you recall how much comes in roughly each year for the
Approximately $550,000.
550?
Yeah.
Okay.
The whole budget was 1.3, I think it was this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so the costs have escalated in terms of the hauler and the disposal costs. I know there was some reluctance to increase the bag fees just because if there's a tipping point where people say that these bags are too expensive, I'm going to contract with a private hauler, it would have a spiral effect of we'd be raising even less revenue as a result of it. But, I mean, you're making a fair point.
Yep. I'll put that together.
I'm just looking at it from, there's a way to do it through contracts with haulers, and there's a way to do it through the town. And if we're offering it, are we doing it more efficiently at less expense than a private hauler? Or, just from the standpoint of a resident, I mean,
We are.
does it cost more per unit the way the town does it? Part of it, I look at it, and there's people on my street that use it, and there's people that are private, and all the trucks say Harvey on them. So ultimately, it comes down to it's private haulers. So are we really offering something that is a better service? Or is it something we're doing because we've done it, and maybe a more effective way for the town to spend its money is in other areas than this?
Our, utilizing the pay-as-you-throw program is less costly than private haulers for a typical household. And you get better services. You're allowed to get $10 bulk stickers, you have recycling, single-stream recycling. There are a lot of opportunities that the town offers that the haulers don't. That being said, I understand, if 75 cents of every solid waste dollar spent is taxes, a lot of communities out there that are not in the trash business, they get out of it because it's expensive.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. We had a difficult time of finding a hauler that was willing to get out of a truck and pick up a trash bag. They don't want to do that anymore. It's been deemed unsafe. They've had injuries and fatalities, not just slip and falls, but car accidents. That's why a private hauler didn't want to do it anymore. They had suffered some significant injuries on the job site. Haulers want to move to the little arm comes out, grabs the bin, dumps it in, nobody gets out of the truck, everybody's safe, and it's quick and more efficient. That's a drastic change to the service we provide, and it's a big cost to the enterprise fund, because you got to buy the totes. And those totes are not cheap. There are some grants for them, but they don't pay for the whole thing.
I just think it might be something that's worth looking at because of the rate that things are growing. This may be an area where it might make sense to not do it, to essentially outsource it.
Yep. Our current contract includes 4% annual increases for collection, as well as recycling processing. We do get a little bit back on recycling processing, depending on the quality of the materials, not a lot. And then our solid waste disposal number, that contract's under negotiations. FY '26 is the last year. That number goes up roughly 3 to 4% a year. So generally, a 4% increase every year is what is seen. And if the bag prices don't go up, there's only one other pocket from come out of,
Yeah.
and that's the tax pocket. So, we'll definitely do a bag study. It was done just before COVID. I remember doing that when John was here. And I was actually surprised, because I know where the revenue breakup was, about 50-50 back then. I said, my goodness, I can't believe we're this high. And I started talking to the communities. Oh, no, 75 cents on the dollar comes out of taxes. I'm like, wow, we're doing something right. And then here I am talking about it right now.
Could I just share an anecdote?
Of course.
Speaking of which, it's not a mandate that the town participate in this program. The town that I live in, not Northborough, does not have any trash program. I live on a street, there's potentially 6 different private haulers that are driving down the street. on a weekly basis. So I contract with a company. At my point in life, I would save significantly buying a pay-as-you-throw bag. I pay $47 a month for a hauler service.
You're not
to come.
generating enough trash anymore.
Correct.
Right, yeah.
But I was filling that bin when I had small children with diapers, so it was filled every week. So everybody has different needs, but I think there's an environmental impact or nuisance impact of, the number of trucks that could be on the street too at the same time, so.
And it is the incentive, the more you recycle, the less our bill is in the end, because recycling costs are huge, and that's a part of your bill. So it's the incentive to recycle to keep it lower.
It's
Yeah,
interesting.
but I contract privately, and I've got single stream recycling too. So that's not a difference between public versus private.
Yeah, some haulers provide that service.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting anomalies is a lot of people are motivated to recycle. More you recycle, good for the environment, less you pay for trash bags.
Right.
So it works out great for you. Well, our contract right now has just under $80 a ton to get rid of solid waste, $105 a ton for recycling. So you buy less bags, you recycle more, costs us more money to get rid of the cycle than we do the trash. So it's, you're struggling.
People aren't going to recycle.
Then buy more bags.
I think the thought was that at one point, I mean, we have that table in the finished document that didn't make it to the packet tonight. I apologize for that. But the graph shows like the volume of recycling increase, and we were incentivizing it and not knowing that the market was going to turn to be costly.
Jeff, you've got a question?
Mr. Chairman, you recognizing me?
Yes, sir.
My virtual arm is exhausted. So I've been in Northborough for 9 years, and the price of those little green bags has never gone up by a penny. And when E.L. Harvey got the contract to begin being our trash collector, I went on their website because one of my frustrations was that recycling is only every 2 weeks. I would have loved to just pay more and get it every week. So I tried to customize something with them to do it every week. And the proposal they gave me back was exactly what I get with the pay-as-you-go through the town at like 20 times the cost. I mean, so that's how cheap it is if you use the little green bags. I get them at Hannaford, wherever you get them from, the town bags. It's hard to believe that in 9 years they haven't gone up, but they really haven't. I mean, they have been $15 for a pack
since the beginning.
since I came here.
Yeah, it's 25 years.
I think that the town has to really take a look at the things that we pay other people to do for us, and think about, one, is this something we could do for ourselves, or two, is this something we need to do at all? And I think this falls into the category of, like Jason was saying, do we need to do this at all? There are clearly plenty of commercial options for the service. I have siblings in Massachusetts that live in towns that don't have any kind of service for this. You just have to figure it out on your own. But there's no way we're getting a lot of bang for our buck when it is so cheap that when I did the cost comparison, it was laughable that the identical people collecting it, the identical amount of times, the identical service, with the exception of the fact that they have to get out of the truck and toss it in, it was a fraction of the cost. So I just think it's something we really have to look at. I agree with George. I think we have to look at, is this something it's worth doing at all, to the extent it's costing us any money? Because even though I appreciate how cheap it is as a resident, if it gets us closer to 2.5, I don't like it. That's more important to me. So, and I think a lot of residents will feel the same way.
And I'm just looking at, there's a lot of things that are driving our budget up. And, we've looked at, adding EMTs and for fire. We're looking at a number of police officers over the next couple of years. And those are important. And, clearly growth in the school budget is important and expensive. And it's more along, I'm thinking of, are there some things that aren't that big a deal that we could do another way, or not offer is a service that would allow us to take care of these other things which are conceivably much more important. So it's more along weighing out those.
The more tax subsidy that's used for the enterprise fund, in my opinion, the more unbalanced it becomes, because there's a lot of taxed entities that do not have the option of the service.
Right.
I kind of disagree. I think trash service is an important part of what the town should be doing.
You want to do your microphone, Bob, just to make sure he picks it up?
I just think it's an important part of service that the town provides, and I think trash service is one of them. I'd like to see them get rid of it, and then all the
I'm trying to just put
recycling.
them in a relative order, that's all.
Yeah.
You know,
No, I know, but I think
you know
trash
what I mean?
service is up there, and recycling is too.
Yeah, but I wouldn't put it ahead of schools, and I wouldn't put it ahead of, police and fire.
Best option on that might just be to look at the bag fees and what kind of increases we can do
Yeah.
on the bag fees.
We'll do a comp on the bag
Right.
fees as well as the tax subsidy, and see where it lands. I mean, I have the old one, I can make the same phone calls, and I'm sure they all appreciate it when you pass it around, so I'll absolutely do that. So what I did on the memorandum is identified on the front page, all the general fund increases outside of contractual things, such as, labor. Well, I don't have healthcare in the general fund, but those types of things. So our fuel island, the software system that's used there is no longer supported. It uses Internet Explorer. Is that the one that's been sunsetted, that doesn't exist anymore? Yeah, that's what it uses, so they don't support it anymore. So if it goes down, and it will eventually, but whatever. If it goes down, we don't have any fuel reporting. So we don't know when the tanks are empty. It's a problem. It's only $2,500, but I thought it was important to point that out, that it's something that's needed. So we increased, this is to your point, Mr. Chairman, $22,000 for the dog park, which includes supplementing the mulch in the 1 acre runaround area. The additional labor in order to do that. My expectation is, under contractual services, we'll need to have someone come in and remove a bunch of that mulch. One of the problems with dog parks is that you mulch it, the dogs run around, and they make this path around the outside of the fence, but it turns into a windrow of mulch on the outside, and eventually the mulch gets deep enough so your 5-foot chain link fence is now 4, and dogs are jumping out. I've spoken to other operations and as well as the planning director, and she said, yeah, that could be a problem. So my expectation is we're gonna have somebody come in and clear that stuff out. The thought is that DPW can do that. Well, we're gonna clear it out with a front end loader. We have a 6-wheel dump truck, not a trailer dump. That would take 2 or 3 staff members an entire week to do it. We have other work to do. We can't do that. Plus, where do we put it? We put it at the highway garage, the only place for us to dump it. Then we hire a contractor to come there and pick that stuff
Pick it
up
up
and put it in the
anyway.
trailer dump, and then send it out to dump it. So why not just get the contractor with the excavator and the trailer dump over the dog park and do it, instead of moving it twice? That's the thought, of just being a little more cost-effective and efficient. Not sure what the number's gonna be, I just want to be confident and comfortable with it. I told you about the DEP pumping of the new tight tank. You're familiar with the ARPA expenditures that we've had over the past frantic year plus. There's been a lot of crosswalk lighted enhancements, the reflector, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, the RRFBs. We're gonna have, at some point, 15 of them in town. The police department has the radar signs. They purchased a bunch under ARPA. Those are gonna be installed. We have a couple lighted traffic and traffic signs. One is two are speed limit signs, and one is gonna be a speed limit sharp curve sign. Somebody's gotta maintain those. That's not what we do. We could take one down and fix it. We've done that before when we had 3. We would take it down, we bring it to the shop, we put it up on sawhorses, and we get to it. It's that project, while you're doing your regular job, you got that other thing on the side that you do. We can't do that when we have 45 of these things in town. It's just not fathomable. So we reached out to a local vendor. He's actually in town on Otis Street. He's helped us out in the past with the Amazon, the school zone lights that seem to be on all the time. He's helped us out with setting those clocks and things. So we have a $5,000 for a vendor to assist us with that. I talked to you about the Brigham Street Burial Ground. I would hate to see CPA's funds go to a beautification project like that and have the turf just fall apart. The project funds were relatively tight on that. We did what we could with what we had. The grass, it's 20/20 grass, 20 feet away, 20 miles an hour, looks beautiful. You get out there and walk on it, it's sparse. So I'm hoping some relatively robust fertilizing treatments by a professional turf contractor will help. That's my goal. And then portable toilets, that used to be paid for by the rec department. They've run into some financial constraints. Jason knows a little more about them than me, but they're pushing some of their operating budget is being transitioned over to the general fund as opposed to purely out of their revolving revenue. And this was one of the pieces that got pushed over to the general fund. These are porta potties at Ellsworth, Memorial Field, Dog Park, so Assabet.
Typically, the point of transitioning those to the parks budget rather than a revolving fund is they're not part of a revenue-generating program. So it was, the programs aren't generating enough revenue to pay for themselves if we start adding ancillary costs that aren't related to the revolving programs, and that was the intent of moving.
Have a similar logic of-
Writing that practice.
Yeah, similar logic of moving the staff salaries out of the revolving fund as well. Or,
Well, yes and no. I mean, the mechanics are a little more complicated because we carry the administrative staff within the general fund, and we do a transfer out of the revolving fund. That transfer used to include the entire amount of the salaries. We've been reducing it because of a declining fund balance. We can't bring a fund balance into deficit.
So in order to, sorry.
Go ahead.
no,
One of the things that I think is important is to have costs of things where the revenue is. And if the reason we have porta potties and the cost of doing that is because of offering recreational facilities, then we should make sure that the costs of supporting those recreational facilities are in the same place, so we have an idea of, what's coming in versus what it costs to do. And when you kind of separate them in completely different areas, it's a problem. So I'm not exactly sure how this volume aspect of it works, but again, when you separate things like that, now all of a sudden the cost becomes immaterial, and expansion of things happens, and it pops up someplace else where you're not really measuring them relative to each other.
I understand what you're
You
saying.
understand what I'm saying?
If I take $50 out of this pocket, I got an empty spot for $50 in there. Might as well put
Right,
something
right,
in
and
there
you're
like a new program.
ignoring the other
Yeah,
pocket.
throw another program in
kind
there.
of
Yep, I understand.
yeah, so an alternative to transferring the porta potties over to the parks line in Public Works would have been to increase the program fees in recreation.
Right.
To see if
Right,
they can balance.
Yeah, but I think the point was that the parks exist and recreation programs exist, but the porta potties weren't there to support recreation programs that are revenue generating. So that,
It's a little the same. I mean, I went through this in my career I was responsible for the cost of the phone system, and I had hospitals who were selling phone services to private practices, and they were gathering the revenue, and they were selling more phone lines, and I was responsible for paying for the phone lines, but the revenue was over here. And they loved the revenue, but they didn't,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing doesn't, and, they would present it as like, look at all this money we're bringing into the institution, and they weren't reflecting the fact that, the cost was over here. And so it's just keeping them together gives you an idea, and then you get an idea what the net of it is.
Right, so to that point, the direct cost of the programs should be provided for adequately within
Right.
the revolving fund, but
Right.
additional expenses should not be taken from a revolving fund because we can't draw that revolving fund into a deficit, because there's no general fund subsidy coming into the revolving fund.
Right.
That was the
Okay.
practice we're trying to correct.
Well, I realize my example, is not 100%
Right.
kind of thing in
And
line.
I
but
think
this
we're
idea
saying
of
the same
Keeping them
thing.
together is,
I think we're saying the same thing.
yeah.
That's why we have the healthcare for our water and sewer staff in the water and sewer enterprise funds. It's 100% representative of what it needs to fund that, as opposed to the general fund.
Exactly.
Yep, I
Okay.
understand. So there are some substantial increases, as you look through, 50,000 for a tight tank, 20-something thousand for a dog park, 30, 40, there's $55,000, $60,000 of increases there. So all in all, in the general fund for public works, the increase is 4%, is 162,000-ish, 161,700, so $162,000 increase. In order to keep in order to keep the cost down as best we can, we eliminated some of the items that we could hold off on. Guardrail replacement, we have a program where we replace $25,000 of guardrail every year. We've been doing that consistently. We postponed it in 2020 and 21 due to COVID, brought it back in 22, 23, 24. We'll put the brakes on it this year to try to reduce the impact on the budget.
Okay.
We have a spot drainage repair. There are times when we have drain failures that our equipment can't handle. We have an excavator. It's a small excavator. It's really convenient around the cemetery. You got a water main break. It goes down 5 feet real easy. It doesn't take up the entire road. But you saw the big orange one that was taking down the house that burned at number 1 Jenkins. That's the type of excavator that this money's for. So we rent an excavator, an operator. They come out with a big dump truck and we fix something huge. Our guys are in the hole. They're doing the thing, but I got a huge truck, huge excavator. That gets me one day of that stuff in case something big happens. Grounds improvements, we put $2,500 in for little stuff. If the 3-well memorial, that got all rebuilt by a local contractor in town who's a vet. We bought the materials, $2,500. He donated the labor. We did the same thing at the Veterans Memorial at Howard Street Cemetery. It's nice to have that in there if somebody comes up and says, hey, you know what? I'd really like to make something beautiful. Here you go. $2,500 worth of plants from Bigelow. Go do something gorgeous for the town with free labor. We'll suspend that for the year. The tree services for the parks, that's usually for something we can't get to. So, for example, Ellsworth McAfee Park. The perimeter of that park touches the Arsenals. What street do they live on? Right before. It's on the left-hand side as you go into Ellsworth. I can't remember.
What is the street? I should know.
I can't remember the street. It's a dead end. Anyway, the park abuts that, and there's some trees back I can't get to. We can't get a bucket truck back there. They got septic systems. I can't do it. So I have to have a tree contractor come out who can climb these things. We don't climb. We'll never climb. That's not what we do. But we have trees that we own that are in people's backyards that are failing, looking bad, and/or have fallen, and we need to get them cleaned up. That's what that money is for. We'll postpone that, do our best with the guys we have. If something really bad happens, I go to my tree contractor, who's specifically for public shade trees, take it out of the tree budget and have them do that. So there's a belt and suspenders there, but that's something we could forego for a little while.
Okay.
So with those cuts, and if you were to remove the tight tank, our operating budget for the general fund would only go up 2.8%. So the tight tank is what's, I don't want to say killing us, but that's a big piece. And I'm hopeful after a year, we realize it's 22 grand or 18, 28, something, not 50.
You got to get some history on that.
Yeah, but I did the calculations. I was conservative, we wash the trucks after every snowstorm, so that kind of thing.
Hey, Jeff, you got a comment?
I recall in the memo seeing the word mandatory when it came to the tight tank, though. So, what does mandatory mean?
The EPA came out with a MS4 permit. It's a NIPSI permit for stormwater treatment and control. The first permit well, the most recent permit is expiring now, and there's a new one coming out. It requires the town to do a lot of different stormwater things. It takes cleaning of stormwater to the next step. The current permit that we're under now requires us to locate every single outfall we have for drainage, test it during dry weather to make sure somebody's septic system isn't leaking into it, test it in wet weather to make sure it's not having some runoff from some nasty facility. It also requires us to have stormwater management plans for larger facilities. My guess is that Algonquin probably has one. We have one for our highway garage because it's big enough. So part of the stormwater management plan is an engineer's evaluation of the facility. Where are your catch basins? Where are your outlets? What kind of nasty stuff do you do here? And where does the drippings from that nasty stuff end up? One thing that was noted in our stormwater management plan preparation was that our floor drains were discharging to our septic system, which therefore qualifies a septic system as an unpermitted groundwater injection well. Can't do that. DEP knows it's there. They haven't issued us a notice of noncompliance at NON. Obviously, no ACO. I won't even tell you what that means. But that's mandated. We have to do something with that. Did it have to be a tight tank? No. We could have built a car wash with a recycling facility. You know, a lot of DPWs that are on septic systems will have a wash water recycling process like you would see at a scrub-a-dub or something. This was much more cost-effective at this point. So, but it is mandated by DEP.
If we didn't fund this line item, we could be exposing ourselves to greater risk.
Yes. Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, we would not be allowed to wash our trucks in the garage anymore, and which means we'd have to find someplace to wash our truck. I don't know what we would do. Build a Quonset hut somewhere where they have sewer in the town hall. I don't even know. White Cliffs, maybe? I don't know. It would be bad.
Okay. All right, thank you.
The White Cliffs truck wash. That would not go over well.
The statues and.
So that's, I don't want to say the bird's eye view, that's the drone's eye view of what I have. One last thing on the enterprise funds. We do early projections on our rate study. So what I mean is we develop our rate study just after the fiscal year, after July 1. That way we have all of our revenue from the prior fiscal year, and we have our approved operating budget and our approved capital. So we put all that into the rate study. This has been built into the rate study, the capital plan, as well as the operating budget for both the water and sewer funds. Things change between now and July, obviously, but knock on wood, as long as we continue down the path, we're looking at probably a 3 to 4% on the water side and maybe a 0 to 1% on sewer. Industry, I don't want to say standard, but typical in the industry is somewhere in the 4 to 5% range each, outside of odd debt exclusion type stuff.
Any questions on that portion? Did you want to cover capital items too, or
Happy to talk about them. I have
pop through?
my
Or
big
do
pile
we
here.
have any questions on the Public Works capital items?
Oh, I have questions on, what's the status on culverts and things
Okay.
like that. So that was a hot topic. There was roads and so.
So last year at the town meeting, we got approval for $300,000 for drainage and sidewalks. It was our first year for a capital item to combine those two. In prior years, we had discussed alternating drainage, 1 year sidewalks, drainage sidewalks. We decided to combine them due to the unforeseen circumstances that culverts pose. We lost a lot of culverts over the past 6 years. Rice Ave, Davis Ave, Ridge Road, Lincoln Street Elementary School. There's been a bunch, Fisher Street. We got the $300,000. We were looking forward to some sidewalk work in some of the, downtown neighborhood areas. And we had 2 culvert failures. Howard Street, when you pass the Z School on your left-hand side, just after the Howard Street Cemetery, just before the Kaiser Cemetery, right after Howard Street. There's like a little rusty railing on the right-hand side. You'll see a big roadway patch. That culvert failed. That culvert conveys Cold Harbor that goes over to Church Street, where that culvert failed. There's 2 culverts on Church Street that convey that waterway, as well as the Howard Street. They're all built from the same year. They're all the same looking thing. We dug the hole up. They had the same type of failure. We're currently in the design and permitting phase for cured-in-place pipe on both of those. They're still round. There's holes in them, like literal basketball holes in them, but they're round. So we can put a cured-in-place pipe in there now. Wait 5 years and they lose round and you can't do it anymore. So cured-in-place pipe, think about like a sweat sock that's filled with, that's soaked with cement and fibers and stuff, and you slide it in there, you fill it up with air, and you put a fancy light in it, and it cures it, and you drill the ends out, and then there you go. You got a brand-new pipe inside of an old pipe. It's kind of like that. So we're in the permitting process for that. We have the double-barrel culvert on Brigham Street, right at the golf course. It's not a critical connectivity location, because it's easy to get around if that roadway was to close because the culverts fail. But again, those culverts are round still, and they're even easier because there's two of them. I can block one, slip line it, and then block the other one and do that one, and then that one's done. We have other items you'll see later on a capital plan, a bridge replacement. We have some bridges that are in bad condition, specifically the one on Hudson Street. You know, the big, just when you come down Hudson Street past Pierce on the left, you go down the hill, there's like a big industrial building before you get to River Street on the right. Just before that building, you'll see there's some like orange barriers and a sign like sidewalk closed or something. That bridge is falling apart. The stones are dislodged. It's a dry stone foundation and abutments. That's going to need to be replaced. So that's on the horizon. A little bigger than a culvert, smaller than a conventional bridge. Either way, it costs money.
But you said you got some funding for coverage on the first couple, I think you said, right?
We got money for Aspet Hill drainage. We just received an earmark for that.
Yeah, that's good.
Which will help out with the design services. I know many of you have heard about the Aspet Hill neighborhood. I'm not sure if you have, Terry. So we're asking for design money at town meeting this year under the capital plan to design the repair to the pipes up there. We got to get that done. The roads are terrible, as are the sidewalks. When that's done, we can pave the roads, put that neighborhood back to how it should be.
It's good to see some forward progress on the culvert thing, because I know it had to stand still for a little bit.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any movement on the dam removal?
Boom. Yes.
That dam removal.
Yes. We have overcome the vast majority of the hurdles for permitting. Design and permitting for this is $250,000. It's a lot of work. We got an order of conditions from the Shrewsbury Conservation Commission. We're currently in front of the Boylston Conservation Commission. There's more interest in the Boylston side, just because that's where the property around the pond is, the impoundment, and the majority of the dam is located in Boylston. The spillway, where you see all the water coming down the rocks, that's in Shrewsbury, but the rest of it's all in Boylston. So we're in the Conservation Commission process right now, and the only other permit left is an Army Corps permit. We've gone through MEMA and EIR, Chapter 91, 401, Natural Heritage, Chapter 253 permit. Like, there's probably more than half a dozen permits we've gone through. So we're close. The goal and expectation is that we'll close out the permitting in the next 3 months, at which point we can get a construction cost estimate and then start seeking construction funds. The Dam and Seawall Program funds removals just like they did the design for this. The grant we got for the design was 80% of the cost, with 20% coming out of the capital plan, which was 100% funded by the Water Enterprise Fund, because the Water Department owns it. My expectation is either April 26, or in the event there's an October, in that window, we'll be ready to seek Water Division funds for the removal.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on Public Works? Sounds good. Excellent. Thank you for those details.
Thank you. If anything else comes up, Mr. Chairman, please reach out. Always happy to help and come back.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
One of the things that Mr. Charpentier mentioned was still have labor negotiations as an open item. Are there do we know a timeline on that, when that might be settled?
Well, would like to settle before July 1. We're doing well. Yeah, I'm going to say maybe end of May, roughly.
So the modeling we've done for the budget is going to stay in place,
Yes.
that
Yeah,
part of the
and
model is not going to
Of course, this is a
change?
projection, just like anything else, but that's
Yeah,
the best we
okay.
can do at this point.
So that will stay as estimated. Any timeline on health insurance that we know of?
I'm going to exit on that one.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
We do have a collaborative meeting coming up. Our insurance broker is waiting for more information from Harvard Pilgrim, and we just met with another dental plan to see if we could swap dental carriers in order to reduce the increase. So we're still waiting, I would say, within the next couple of weeks, we should know for sure. But we have a broad number, around 17% is what they're saying now. We build just in case families that are coming on or whatnot to our health insurance plan. So we have a little bit of wiggle room that way to reduce maybe 1 to 2%. But other than that, yeah, we're budgeting based on
Yeah,
17.
so,
or-
do you want me to go through some of the
Yeah,
details?
absolutely. Go ahead.
We're currently carrying in the budget a 15% increase in that line. And the way that we're anticipating the premiums going up 17%. We're not there yet. The meeting with the broker, we're at 19% with
Yeah.
Harvard Pilgrim. That's what they're offering. That's, the 17% was provisional on us changing dental carriers from our current Delta Dental plan to Harvard Pilgrim
yeah.
Dental. That's one thing that we need to work through. I don't know how strong of a position we're in to make an ultimatum to our brokers to tell them, you better bring it in at 17% or else. Like, I don't know what kind of leverage we would have at this point, as being so late. To get to the 15%, as Steph was saying, we budget for qualifying events for people. So we call that in our internal documents unknown migration. So we have migration for employees that we know. For retirements, so if we know we were adding a position, which in our current level service budget, we have no new positions added for it, but if we were to add a new position, we would budget for that employee taking a family plan potentially. So we need to provide for what we call, quote, known migration of positions that we know are changing or going to be benefit eligible. So what we've cut back on, the schools have made a provision or an agreement with us to allow us to charge the premiums of the cafeteria workers to the school lunch program. So that provided some savings. It's approximately $120,000 that got moved, that's moving out of the general fund as a result of that. Then at the same time, we carried, I don't know if you folks recall, but one of the biggest appropriation turns backs in the past couple of years has been employee benefits. And we've been very conservative with that unknown migration. We've carried somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000 per year within that number. And that's partially was to smooth the health insurance increases over the years. Over the past 10 years or so, we've had a 3%, an average of 3% increase. Last year, I think it was a 7% increase in the premium, but we covered that with a 3 or 4% increase in the budgetarily. So this year, when we started the process and did the summit over the summer, we had said 4%, like we were conservative estimate for 4%. So that 4% seemed legitimate at the point in the summer. Then we started looking at claims data that had been coming in the past 6 months and around December, and it was looking like we were being told 10 to 12%, and we were very clever and said, we'll carry 8% in the budget then, and we'll make that work. Then the news came at the end of February of the 24.9% renewal rate that we were offered, and that really, that pushes us into, like, from having no levy capacity left to being in an override situation, which we've thankfully come back from in this budget model now. So partnering with the schools, we're working with our JPA, the Joint Purchasing Arrangement members for the risk pool. We've got about 1,500 people.
Yep, 1550, yep.
And, some of the ideas that were offered, like, that have come up through our consultants have not been, they don't seem all that attractive for options. One being, why don't we self-insure for pharmacy
Prescriptions.
costs?
Yeah.
And,
Which
No,
if
the-
HMOs don't want to do it, why would we? It's.
right, and that's what's driving our
Yeah.
costs up.
Right.
Primarily, like, the claims costs are going up as a result of pharmacy costs, and it's really shocking that how much of healthcare costs are related to the pharmacy costs relative to medical services are provided by providers. I've had the pleasure of going to my education program where I'm meeting with, or attending with finance people from across the state. This is going on everywhere, and everybody's experiencing the same thing. The numbers may be slightly different, but it seems like a common story that they were expecting 10 to 12, to 10 to 16, got 25%, and now they're beating it back to 16 or 17% and feeling thankful for it. And it's
Yeah,
kind
we
of
had a survey and it's high teens across the board, from our neighbors, from beyond our neighbors, so, yeah,
so it's kind of a dark story, and
for everybody, yeah.
hanging over us with this budget this year.
And then even the school transportation costs, their new contract, so that's another heavy item. Yeah.
All right.
So that concludes undistributed. Well, no,
Yeah,
we'll
almost-
get more
you almost
into it.
got all of it, right?
But we jumped ahead a little
Yeah.
bit because that's part of the undistributed budget presentation, which, if you want to go in order, we can talk about the finance budget. I mean, there's not a lot to talk about. We're not proposing any new programs or anything exciting. Overall, the finance budget is composed of the treasurer collectors division, the assessing division, and the accounting division. And overall, it's a, let's see, what did I say it was? It's overall, the three divisions together are going up $20,259, or 1.89%. And that's not a result of anything exciting that I did to save costs. It's just we were conservative with our staff. We added a town accountant position and rehired a new assistant town accountant, and those salaries came in less, and we also filled those mid-year too. So there'll be some budgetary savings this year as well from what was budgeted.
I didn't have any questions on that. We're good on that? Okay, good. Thank you, Jason.
All right, so I handed out a copy of the overall budget model. There were some edits that didn't get reflected in this version that got printed, but those edits weren't material relative to it, so we can talk about it, and we're in the same scenario, same situation. There's no that great difference between what it was edited to. It was just a matter of like a couple tens of thousands of dollars, not millions or hundreds of thousands even. I don't know the best way to go about this. If you want me to share the screen?
Yeah, then maybe it's easier, yeah, if you do that, it's easy to highlight what line you're
Jeff
then looking
and
at.
Tim don't have the benefit of seeing these documents that I'm talking about, so maybe I'll.
Yeah, so
Screen
if
share.
you present in the meeting, right, then that's a good way for them to see it.
Yep.
Ooh, I see one that jumps right out. Is that working for you?
Yes, just some technical difficulties today.
With the 298-page printout, I was hoping that you got it out of your system, right?
Bear with me for one moment.
Trying to think, maybe a couple then continued side questions. So, other than the health insurance, are there any other significant open items from a budget perspective?
Well, the other thing that, I don't know if I'd call attention to it or not, but we've plugged in, I know this is going to be difficult for anybody to see, but this is,
Can you blow it up any?
Probably zoom in.
yeah, I think I can. Let's see.
Yeah, with just like the ads.
So,
There you go.
the other thing, as mentioned, the union contracts are open. We've plugged an amount in for settlement of contracts. You'll see one extremely large increase in personnel line.
Yeah.
And that's a buffer.
That's your holding spot for
Yeah.
the results.
That's,
That's 400,000, something like that.
yeah, typically, that number would include the merit raises for the non-contractual employees as well as the municipal employees association, those that are subject to it. So about $50,000 as a base would be related to that practice. We have approximately 80,000 in for some anticipated retirements that are coming of longstanding employees. And for people that don't know, we have a vacation benefit that's called for in the personnel bylaw that dictates the non-contractual employees' benefits. There was a vacation plan for employees that existed before sometime in the 2000s. So some of the longer-standing employees have a significantly more generous vacation plan than current employees. So we have to budget for it somewhere. So that's been added within that number are some of these long-serving employees that have indicated that they're going to retire, and we've done a calculation to figure out what benefits are owed to them.
This is banking your vacation time, and then when you retire, you have to pay it out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, the difference between the plans are that you basically are limited to carry over 2 weeks on July 1st through the bylaw, but you get your annual accrual from the prior year, because under the old plan, you would not accrue any time until July 1st of the next year. So we accrue starting on day one now under the current plan. So the benefits, the unused balances of time is much less now for more current employees, but with potentially, I think, 3 or 4 people, that's where that number comes from. And then the rest of it is money to provide for union settlements beyond what's been budgeted in departmental budgets already.
May I ask a question, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Bob, sorry.
Just out of curiosity, why are we spending an extra $1 million on special warrant articles? Why is such an increase, and what is that?
It's simply the capital plan. So it's the capital plan, Bob. It's
Our
the,
capital plan.
it's the $1 million is funded from free cash, so that's,
Oh, I'm looking on undistributed expenses, right?
yeah, so it is listed within the town's budget, but the funding source for the special articles are free cash.
Okay. Okay. I think I understand.
And so if we were to look at that column on the capital plan summary and subtract out some of those ones, we'd get close to that.
Yeah, within the packet, and we can talk about it in a moment, but there's some details of the capital plan articles that are conceived of under that number.
All right, what do you want to highlight then on the
All right, so
budget summary?
let me open a different file. All right, so within
Yeah.
undistributed, this is what's typically conceived of. Employee benefits, so the health insurance numbers that we're carrying, this is, you see the highlighted number, that's what we're carrying now, $968,000 increase. We had relatively good news within the retirement assessment. Typically, overall, their assessments to all the member communities are 10%. We fared a little better under the actuarial calculation, so we're carrying $3.3 million for retirement assessments. Building and liability insurance, we have estimates from the insurance carrier that to increase those a certain amount. This debt service number,
That's principal and interest?
principal and interest, yeah, debt
And-
excluded and non-excluded, that's the
Where are we
total.
with due diligence on the bond counsel, et cetera, on the fire station?
Oh, we're moving along, we've fulfilled all the requirements, so, what we're waiting for is the bids to see if we're gonna adjust the amount that we borrow for the fire station. We're gonna see what the bids come in. Those are due, I believe, March 26th, so we'll have a small window of time to adjust that to that point. One of the things that we need to finalize are our financial statements, which we have drafts, we've reviewed them. There was one small edit that was just text, it wasn't numbers, so we've complied with all the requirements, and we've forwarded our statements our audited
And
statements.
what's the timing for getting the updated bond rating?
It's early, I just looked at the calendar. It's sometime in April, but early April.
And until we get that, we can't, it's hard for the financial advisors to give us much more insight into debt, into interest rates, right?
Yeah, I mean, they haven't asked us to revise our numbers at all. So it's still looking like they gave us a slightly conservative number that hopefully will come true. Exactly. Yeah, our state assessment.
Have they seen the updated budget model, though, with where we are with the cap, et cetera?
Yes and no. That will likely be a question of how we're handling it this year.
Okay.
And
I would
have-
think, I think they would want an insight into next year as well.
They'll ask us about it, yeah, but our.
Do we have an answer?
Yeah, we're looking at our budgets carefully. Yeah, we'll have a good crafted answer for that, working with the financial advisors. Coincidentally, the conference I was at, there's a lot of presentation on, there's a lot of interest in debt this year, and a competing financial advisor to the one we use was presenting this year, and they talked about the importance of sticking to your financial policies, having established financial policies, sticking to them, having adequate reserves, which I think we're still in the target of, the same bandwidth that we've been. So I think it looks good for us to maintain our bond rating.
Okay.
Yeah, and so these numbers here are what comprise the undistributed section of the budget.
Any other questions through that section? Pretty good. So just to say it out loud for folks that might be listening, so if I just go to the bottom of the budget summary here,
Sure.
right? If it's correct to kind of just look at that overall aggregate number, nearly a 9% increase. Am I reading that right?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, so with that very large amount that's in there for the for labor, that's pushing the town department requests, because that's added in on that cover sheet. Here, let me share my screen again so people know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so these numbers, they're broken out within here. We have town department requests,
6.5.
6.5.
And I was going to back into that, right? So if overall, we're approaching 9%, if we take it down to just look at what the different department budgets are, 6.5.
Right, but the 6.5 would be less if we hadn't dropped in that large component for labor.
And some of the departments we haven't talked about and wouldn't see a presentation from, but, rough numbers, building department, 4.5% or so, MIS approaching 3%, library well under 3%, actually under 2.5%, recreation, 4%. And then I have a question on the senior center, 4.5%. There was some talk about an additional position for the senior center. Does that 4.5% include an additional position or not?
No. No,
It does.
these are simply the level
Level
service
service.
requests.
This is no additional, okay. And I know there was then a request for that, additional position, but that was, I think, before the director departed, so we'll wait to evaluate the need for that position until the new director, or what's the thought there?
It's still a need. It's whether or not it was the senior center position, MIS asked for a position, and the police chief, and these are all ideal budgets,
Yep.
asked for a dispatcher. And I believe, was that it?
We talked about
Yes,
that.
it was the three.
Yeah. So at this point, it's up to the financial bodies to make that decision on whether or not they're all a need, as in staffing, but
Okay. So as presented, that wasn't an additional position for MIS and was not an additional position for the senior center?
no, we went with the level service.
Okay, and then on the, and then for the dispatcher, we saw the difference in those numbers last week, if you included the dispatcher.
Correct, yes.
Dispatcher, okay.
Yeah, so there's some mitigating information related to the senior center position. The senior center has a revolving fund. We have a contract with WRTA where the program revenues for that program flow through the revolving fund. There's some indirect reimbursements that we get from the WRTA that go into the revolving fund, and to the point of aligning revenues to revenues where they are to the expenses that generate the revenues. There may be some ability to add that position through, that wouldn't impact the general fund. So that's a conversation that needs to be had internally. But that one would not be a direct, just drop-in obligation on the general fund if that were to be considered. But calling your attention, the point that was made was the levy capacity. This budget is balanced. We don't need an override this year, but as was projected, we're probably going to need one next year.
It looks like there is no levy capacity after this year.
300,000, I think,
Yeah.
is the neighborhood that we're in.
It was actually a little less.
There is no levy capacity.
Yeah. 293, yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just would suggest that the real question is how big of an override will we need next year?
I think it's dependent on, again, health insurance.
I understand.
Yeah,
But you also, let me
Yeah, no,
finish.
I know what you mean.
We've all been doing these kind of long-range financial planning and budgets for a long time. So we need to make our best estimate as to what we think the market's going to look like, what health insurance is going to look like. I think you need to expect that it's going to be another big number. And you need to look at how big is that override requirement going to be? Will the town, from a practical perspective, which items are you going to put on the ballot? How are you going to do that? I think it's important that there needs to be some addressing of that in this current budget cycle. You can't just say, well, next year we'll need an override, without saying, A, how much is it going to be, about, give me a ballpark range, and these would be the things that we'll need to consider from a program cutting perspective. And if the folks want to keep it going, they can vote yes. But I just think we've known we went from 4.5, I've said this last week, we went from 4.4 to 2.7, now to 0 in 2 years. And yes, there's inflation, et cetera, we should have been planning for this 2 years ago, frankly, and I know you weren't here, but you're going to get stuck with the problem. We need to address it currently, not next year, currently. That's my opinion.
And I guess you tried to provide budget guidelines for 3%, and some departments didn't meet that goal. So I don't know
Well,
if there was
the budget instructions were to provide a scenario that would present a 3% budget, but to present we put together a level service budget, but we also would have to make some cuts to get to a 3% budget with some of the departments. And then we also quantified the cost of the people's ideal budgets that were presented over the summer. Yeah, so if I was to estimate what would be needed, here, let me share my screen again. But basically, if you look at the $2 million.
At least.
In that neighborhood.
At least, yep.
So if you look at what was used of the levy capacity, the unused levy capacity, that's decreased by about $2.2 million per year.
Yep.
That's what I would estimate it to be if.
And that's assuming nothing else weird happens, right? So you should figure something weird's going to happen anyways. So the question becomes for folks like our illustrious town administrator is, do you want to take some actions this year? Or do you want to wait for next year? What makes the most sense from a financial perspective? I know that I'm looking at a bond rating. I just don't like the idea that we're at the cap when they take a look at that final budget number and go. And then when I look at where we are from a debt service perspective, if you go to Peasley School and say, well, that's a must, which who knows if it is a must or not, but if you go down that process and that additional borrowing or capital requirements for a big building for town hall, et cetera, I mean, I think even in your model last year, you showed us that a debt service percentage it was almost outside the range, right?
Well, it was approaching 10%.
Yeah, it was getting close to that range. It gets to you the nervous perspective, right? And then you guys are even suggesting that we borrow for certain capital expenditures this year. Like, I don't know you want to be adding debt service when you're going to have a 2.5 cap, and you know you're going to get to something in the next few years where you're at a balancing act. I just think there's a lot that you guys need to kind of consider over the next week or so before we make some recommendations as to what we should do. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, well, we are absolutely looking at every aspect, and especially the aspect, you can only kick the can down the road so long as well. So we're looking at maintenance schedules and what we can live without for a year, but then again, that compacts and compounds, and so yeah, there's a lot that comes into play. But we're definitely.
And I certainly appreciate that, and it's not an easy
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
And you can go through the budget and say every line item makes sense. There's nothing that doesn't make sense. It's just, what can you afford? And what trade-offs are you going to make?
Yep.
And that's the ultimate question. And part of it's, it's not fair to you for a little bit because you don't have a lot of experience with all of the aspects of town and town people, et cetera. But, we haven't made any hard choices over the last 2 years, so now we're in this position.
Right.
And then they're going to be really hard choices.
And then they're going to be really hard choices.
To that point, I mean, we don't have all of the answers today, but to that point, we have been looking at this. I mean, this was maybe not highlighted during our summit last summer, but because it was heard within people's needs over the next 10 years were asked for, and that involved service expansions. We've been very conservative with saving in our stabilization fund, maintaining our reserves. Like if we
Absolutely.
suffer a major calamity or emergency, that's why those things are there. And I believe we would be rated highly and compared to a lot of the other towns in Massachusetts.
No question.
And this won't make anybody feel any better, but again, I've been sitting with finance people from across the state, and it's shocking the number of other towns that are looking for multi-million-dollar overrides, operating overrides for next year.
Right. Well, I don't doubt that at all. I know this is not going to be the only town that has that problem. From a taxpayer perspective, we probably, we have a huge borrowing coming online, which changes that economic equation for individual households much more significantly than if it was just that operational override without fire station debt coming online. I mean, right now, you're looking at a tax levy that's going to go up, based upon the way it works right now, 10.43%. That's the amount of increase in taxes that we have to collect at this budget level.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it includes the fire station debt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is not insignificant, but
But you have to look at the economics of, so when you put things together for a Prop 2.5 override, if you're at 10% this year, and then you're going to, well, we can't live within 2.5, it's like, I don't know, you're going to have to make some hard choices about what you're willing to put on that ballot that you may lose, you may not have, and it becomes trade-offs. Maybe everybody will say yes, and God bless them if they do. You know, I think you know my perspective on it. It's just, property taxes are bad because they're regressive. Has nothing to do with how much money you make. 22% of the population, I think, is over 65. The median, the median household income is 160 or so. 40% of the households are probably at 120 or less. These are big numbers, and you know, people want all the services in the world, but at some point they're going to say no, and you're going to have to figure out which services are you going to put on the ballot or manage it in a different way. I think what the town has historically done from a financial perspective of the stabilization funds, the reserve funds, has all been really well managed. We're just at a point where lots of circumstances, and, you know, we added staff. I heard we added staff. We were behind in adding staff, so we added staff 2 years ago or what have you. I'm sorry, the select board and the previous town administrator should have done better from a financial management perspective. And I mean that with all due respect, but the spending got crazy.
Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff.
I think, just on that point, I think that also, from what I've seen in just a couple of years, the Community Preservation Fund is a double-edged sword. I think that sometimes it leads us down this garden path that gets us in trouble, because I remember the presentation they made about the dog park, and oh, it'll be this, it'll be that. Now it sounds to me like we'll have about a 50 grand bill every year from now until doomsday or more, because of all these things that they didn't talk about that. They just said, oh, by Thanksgiving the dogs will be playing, which they're not, but they will soon. It'll be done. I'm sure it's going to be great. I have a dog and it's wonderful, but you know, they didn't talk about that when they were talking about providing the funds to build this thing. And you know, and the Community Preservation Fund is what has the ability to buy a lot of real property that we're holding on to that is, I still think, is not wise from a fiscal perspective. So the town has gotten itself in trouble with a lot of different real estate transactions, and I just think that a lot of these things are brought about by this committee, this Community Preservation Fund, that at town meeting is always very scant on detail, cannot answer any questions with specificity ever, always acts like, oh, it's all this free money, and it always gets us down to where a couple years later we're like, oh, why did we ever do this? It seems to happen all the time, and it makes me question the wisdom of having community preservation funds.
I think that's a good point. We have to look at all of the outside costs, and the dog park is a perfect example
It's a
of forever
structural thing that
costs.
was introduced with no thought,
Yeah.
kind of thing. It was just hey, this is being paid for by the, you know.
Right, it's not a
There's no
one-time.
such thing as free money, but
Yeah.
it's paid for by money that we have, and that's it. But then there's a structural implication that's just going to go on.
Yeah, the maintenance to keep,
And Mr. Chairman, to Jeff's point, last year we bought, this property. We had a 2.5 problem, and we're taking property off the tax rolls. Like, explain that to me. I just,
Actually, that brings me up one question. Are there any updates in terms of issuing requests for proposals for some of our town properties?
yeah, one went out today for White Cliffs.
Okay.
Yes, yep.
And
So that's
one in the works for 4 West Main?
Not yet, not yet.
Made me think about property.
welcome, Mr. Chairman.
He's like, check.
Is it worth mentioning, I think on the warrant that's closed, there's an article for both 4 West Main and
Oh,
White
you
Cliffs.
guys know that, right?
In order
Yeah.
to dispose of them, and then there's also, in case the RFP comes back with a result, there's an article to potentially approve a TIF on both properties.
Yeah, I saw that in the material that you put out. I have to think about that and reserve judgment in my own, like, it's kind of open-ended.
Yeah, and it's not set in stone, it's just another option or availability.
Might be a little bit too open-ended for my conservative chief financial officer taste.
Any other updates?
Oh, well, I would share, the appropriate, Financial Planning Committee met last night, voted their recommendations for the capital articles. The draft report that they were working off of last night was included in the packet. There's their final recommendations have been entered into a report. We're just wordsmithing the final numbers, and we'll be putting that out. So
That'll be ready for the joint budget hearing on the 24th?
on Monday, yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask did they approve all of those articles?
They did not.
May we know which ones they did not?
Do you have it there, Jason?
Yeah.
Since they are supposed to be our consultant.
Fire uniforms?
The fire uniforms were recommended against, and I think the reason behind that was, and if I could paraphrase or speak for others at
Please.
risk of misspeaking, the fire chief has an annual plan to replace the uniforms in question. We're not out of compliance. There's a lot of information given at the time regarding the law surrounding the gear. He was going to provide for replacement on a ongoing schedule, so we just would have to replace the gear after 2027 with the PFAS-free gear to stay in compliance with the law. And so we're currently in compliance with the law, and we would continue to be should that article not be approved. So that at risk of speaking, I think that would encapsulate the reasons why they voted not to support that article.
One additional factor from that is that also buying that many pieces of gear at the same time meant that when it was time to replace, all those replacements spiked at the same time, so
Sure.
the operational budget smooths out the replacement of that gear.
There was the committee considers the community preservation articles. I believe there's a split vote on one of those.
Was
Yeah, I
it
can't
the
remember between the
improvement?
splits.
Let me,
I'll misstate it.
Well, if it's public record, I can go look at it, so if it was,
Yeah,
you
and we'll
you would
and
have
we'll
to watch
see
the
it.
entire meeting.
I can
to
flip
get
through it,
to
I can get
but-
through it, so.
Okay.
We have the list.
And with respect to the beautification project, did they approve that?
No.
Thank you, Steve.
And in the
Yes.
capital improvement plan, now all of a sudden,
That's the one I was forgetting, Sue, thank you.
all of a sudden, there's a $1 million grant in the budget for that, to offset it? Where did that come from? That was not, it was $300,000 when we met with the planning director.
Right, there's a, Steph, do you recall
The
the,
improvement,
Yeah.
the streetscape?
yeah, it was
$1 million of grant.
$1,850,000 initially,
Yeah,
and then she was going to reduce it to $1 million.
Well, it shows us there's a grant.
The MVP grant, yes.
That wasn't mentioned at the meeting we had with her. What is that? Where is it coming from?
It's a state grant, and
So it's still my
right
tax
now,
money.
she's not sure on what she will receive.
Okay.
If anything, but she's pretty sure she will receive a considerable amount, but there's no dollar amount, so it was hard for us to be able to budget that, which is why she decided to shave off the 850 in hopes that she could possibly cover that. A lot had to do with the abutting businesses also joining in on the grant, and, yeah, so.
So since she spoke to us last, she was able to go through the project and determine which portions of the projects were eligible for the Complete Streets grant. So she was able to maximize that, as well as look at what items were available for the MVP, and work in that partnering with the private property owner. So that shifted more into potential grant money, but still potential. So that
Yeah,
needs to
so
be
we're
weighed.
just not sure.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep.
So along those lines, we've got that draft report from the Financial Planning Committee. Let's just see the structure of that. It'll be updated. We'll see a completed report. We're then, we've held off our recommendations. We'll vote our recommendations after the joint hearing on Monday. We'll have a better picture. There might be some public input, that
'Cause
sort of
I
thing.
would like to work through the numbers a little bit on my own that we got tonight.
So hopefully
about
then
right.
with this update, that helps on the summary there. It lets you even do that rough calculation on 27, doesn't it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's good.
So I just looked up the draft report, and it was a split vote on one of the Public Works vehicles, the
Yes.
one for the Public Works the Highway Division, the $95,000 truck.
But that was a 331, wasn't it?
It was 3-3, yeah, 3-3.
Okay, so for upcoming meetings, right? 24th for the joint budget hearing. We need to pencil in then a date after that for us to review a draft report. Our structure is very similar to what you see in the financial planning, in that we have the articles and our votes against it, and then our votes regarding recommendations, and then a rationale for those votes. If I look at dates, I would not want to do the 25th, just to give us some time to incorporate what we learned on the 24th. I think if I remember, were some folks traveling on the 27th?
Yes, I'll be on the road the 27th.
So a 26th, or that following week, one of those dates. And so what I'm assuming is that we don't want to go too late into that second week, because I think for publication of the warrant, we need to have the report finalized some days before.
Yeah, I think it's April 14th.
That's when the warrant would be posted.
Right, yeah.
So,
The town clerk, I tried to clarify with him when the absolute date would have to be, and he said that,
I was kind of
Oh.
tracking the 9th to make sure that
Yeah.
we were all final by the 9th.
I think if we
April
shot for
9th?
that would be.
Like a drop
that would be
dead
good.
date, yeah.
So, so if I throw out to the committee the potential of the 26th or the 1st or the 3rd,
I would lean toward the 3rd.
Day of the week is that?
That's a Thursday,
Thursday.
the 3rd.
I can do that. Can I do that? Yes, I can do that.
Okay. Bob, that's good for you. Jeff or Tim, any problems with April 3rd?
That works for me.
Okay. And so the idea there would be that based on any additional information we get on the 24th, maybe some additional follow-up information as negotiations complete and whatnot, we'd meet on the 3rd to vote our recommendations. What I'd ask also to come to that meeting with is any input, narrative input that you'd like to see in the draft report, or in the report.
Sure. On the 3rd.
Yeah, if you bring that to the 3rd, or even send it to Jason and I prior to the 3rd, actually, that's even better, because then we could bring to the 3rd, a draft for review that incorporates those individual things. What I would anticipate and what would be helpful is, as we look at the articles, traditionally, if we all voted to recommend, there's not much rationale that we put behind it. It's usually, if there's a vote against, that it's good to have some sort of rationale. So then, if you find yourself leaning towards not recommending, then a bullet statement or something like that we can include in the report would be, super helpful for the draft there. Excellent. Then town meeting on the 28th, we'll have a short meeting before then, like at the 5:30 mark, is that
Yeah.
about right? On the 28th would be our bit.
And then the articles related to finance will be done on the 29th? Be 2 days?
Oh, I thought for a second you were like going into the one. I don't know. We'll
Let's
see.
hope so. I won't be here the 30th.
Oh, so you'll be.
Yeah.
Very likely, very likely.
So you're open just 2 nights?
Just 2 nights, yes. Then I'm off to my trip, so.
So I just want to check, though, if we feel comfortable, like on the 3rd, if we come with that material, kind of in hand, or sent beforehand, such that we've got a decent draft, we'll be able to take our votes, massage that narrative a bit, and then between the 3rd and nominally the 9th, Jason and I should be able to finish up the report. Okay. I think we can get that all done in that timeframe. Okay, that is great. Any other items for the committee? Right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Bob. This will be a roll call vote. Tim? I went out of order, surprised him. I'll move on to Jeff.
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
And one more time for Tim?
He abstains.
He abstains. Scott's and I. We are adjourned at 7:53. Thank you.